Okay, so I think your positions on immigration really could be considered rebellious. Let's start right there. The U.S. has a debt to pay to Mexico. Explain that. What do you think the real issue is with those who say go home to the Mexicans? But why can't they simply come to America legally like many of the other immigrants before them? Right now on the show, with so much debate on illegal immigration, we rarely discuss legal immigration, our laws and policies, and how they can be used to lessen the more than 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. Here to shed light on one of those policies and what he calls the tyranny of priority dates is Gary Endelman. Endelman is the in-house immigration counsel for BP America, Inc., handling all U.S. immigration law for the BP group of companies throughout the world since 1995. Let's begin with a disclaimer for you, Gary. Your views do not represent those of BP, right?
That's correct.
Okay, now let's get started. You say if America had a more rational system of legal immigration, then there would be fewer undocumented immigrants. What's irrational? What's wrong with our immigration system here in the United States?
Okay. First of all, I think we have to realize that more immigration is a demographic reality. What do I mean by that? I mean that in the United States, as in all advanced industrialized countries, you have an aging population. And you have a birth rate which is falling as women have more education and employment opportunities, and especially when my generation, the baby boomer generation, retires, there is going to be a tremendous pressure on the system. You will have fewer and fewer workers paying benefits, social benefits, for more and more older people. And since the birth rate will not provide the additional workers to help deal with this, whether in the United States or anywhere, all countries, not just the U.S., are having to look to the only place where we can get additional people in the prime of their working lives, and that is through immigration. So whether we want it, whether we like it or not, whether we want it legally or illegally, immigration is inevitable. More immigration is inevitable from a demographic point of view. There is no other alternative to get workers to pay for a larger and larger percentage of the population that is retired and living longer.
Okay, so let's go back for a moment. With what's wrong with our immigration system. Yes, it's inevitable from a demographic point of view, but right. What's wrong with our system now that we have a problem with illegal immigration?
Okay. The one reason that there are two things to say about that. One reason that illegal immigrants stay in the United States is that they are afraid to go home for fear they won't be able to return. They don't particularly want to stay in the U.S. If there was a circular pattern of migration, the way there used to be in the 1950s, people would come here illegally to find jobs and return home. They would not stay. It's only because they are trapped by our immigration system, fearing that they won't be able to get back, that they're not leaving. So we are, in effect, producing the very problem we claim to be concerned about. That's one issue. The other issue is the reason that people come illegally is that there is an economic need for them, but that they cannot come legally because the system does not allow for it. There are comparatively few green cards awarded to workers who are quote-unquote unskilled, and so they come illegally because there is still a need for them to come to work in our fields, to pick our food, to work in our factories, to work in our nursing homes, and if there wasn't an economic need for it, they wouldn't be here. but the law does not allow a legal means for them to come. So since there is an economic need, they come illegally because that's the only way they can come.
So we need reform. Okay, every president has promised it. Who's responsible really to bring about reform? Congress won't act. The courts are acting in response to states, and the president is fighting the courts and waiting on Congress. Who's really responsible to do something about our immigration laws?
Well, let me just focus on legal immigration because people tend to think that immigration is just about the immigrants, and it's really about us. We have a situation right now where there is a global competition for the best and the brightest, a global competition for talent. We are no longer the only game in town. We're no longer the only place that the best and the brightest can come. They can stay in their home countries where there's an economic rebirth. They can go to other countries. It used to be the United States was the only place a person of talent could come. That's no longer the case. So you have a situation in which, in the 21st century, in a global economy, that country will prevail, will lead, will dominate, that has the best talent, that has the best human capital, just the way in the 19th and 20th centuries, countries that had the best natural resources, physical wealth, physical assets dominated. Now it's talent, human capital. And what is happening here? We have the best and the brightest coming from all over the world, because we have the best graduate schools in the world, because this is where the exciting research and innovation is happening. And then when they come and get their education here, when they are most valuable to us, our immigration system forces them to leave and forces them to work for our competitors, who then are in a better position to take jobs in industries out of the United States. It makes no sense. It's counterproductive to our economic interests to have the immigration system we have. We should be welcoming people with advanced degrees in science and technology and engineering and mathematics, not making it difficult for them to stay.
So let's look at it from a public perspective. Of course, many of the attorneys have the same opinion. Definitely, immigration is inevitable, but the public is not. That's not very palatable to most of the public. Why?
Because I think we've done a very poor job on our side in explaining that immigration is in the national interest, not just in the interest of the alien. And that's because I think that most immigration advocates and most immigration lawyers are pro-immigrant and not necessarily pro-immigration. What do I mean by that distinction? I mean that the reason that I support more immigration is not because I think it is good for the individual immigrant, but because I think it's good for the United States. My focus is on the ability of the immigrant to enhance the national economic interest of the United States. My focus is nation-centric, not so much immigrant-centric. I don't think immigration should be what I think many immigration advocates should be, which is sort of like enhanced or international social work. We should always have an element of our immigration policy dealing with refugees and asylees, but the focus, it seems to me, should be on using immigration the same way we use tax policy, the same way we use all other types of national policies to advance the economic and strategic interests of the United States. So, for example, our immigration policy should not be geographically neutral. Right now, India, for example, gets the same number of green cards as Liechtenstein. China gets the same number of green cards as Monaco. Makes no sense. India is extremely important to the United States right now. We want access to the Indian market, to their economy. Well, they want visas. It seems to me that there is a mutuality of interest there, and the United States should use immigration to advance its own national interests. If we don't have that focus on it, I think we are doing ourselves a disservice. And that's the reason, to come back to your question, that Americans don't really understand why more immigration is in the national interest.